A deepening political crisis in Bosnia Herzegovina. The autonomous Serb region bans state police and judiciary after its leader is convicted of undermining the national constitution. Both the US and EU are condemning the move. So what might happen next? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Sami Zeidan. A new and worsening political crisis in Bosnia-Herzegovina after the parliament of the autonomous entity, Republika Srpska, also known as RS, banned the national police and judiciary from operating there. The leader of the Bosnian Serb region, Milorad Dodik, now calling on fellow ethnic Serbs to quit the federal police and judiciary. All of this follows Dodik's conviction last month for undermining the constitution. Well, he's been defiant in response, ignoring a summons from the national prosecutors. He's been sentenced by the national court to a year in jail and a 6-year ban on holding public office. Bosnian state officials say Dodik's moves amount to a coup. The EU and the US embassy in Sarajevo have all been condemning the Bosnian Serb leader. They say he's threatening the stability and territorial integrity of Bosnia-Herzegovina. Well, before we go to what's been happening on the ground, let's first take a look at the background. Current political arrangements are complex and stem from the 1995 Dayton peace agreement. That deal ended the war following the breakup of Yugoslavia. Dayton set up two main autonomous entities in Bosnia-Herzegovina. One is Republika Srpska, seen here, which is majority ethnic Serb. The other is known as the Federation. It's home to ethnic Croats and Bosnian Muslims. Each of these areas has its own government, parliament and police. The central state also has its own set of these institutions in the capital, Sarajevo. But above them is the office of the High Representative. That office maintains implementation of the Dayton Accord and can override decisions by any authority in the country. We'll explore all of this with our guest shortly, but first, this report from Wilson Dysart.
A standoff between the leader of Bosnia's semi-autonomous Republika Srpska and the central government, meaning a fresh political crisis in a country ravaged by war in the 1990s. President Milorad Dodik is defying a summons from the central government after he was convicted in February of undermining the country's constitution. That oversees a fragile framework for power and territory to be shared between Bosniak Muslims, Croats, and Serbs. On Thursday, Dodik signed laws prohibiting the cooperation between Republika Srpska and the central authorities in Sarajevo.
These laws are now forwarded to the official Gazette. They'll be printed overnight and will come into force the day after, which means on Friday. We will, of course, follow that very efficiently and very efficiently implement these laws.
The internationally brokered Dayton peace accords brought an end to Bosnia's war in 1995 and gave extensive powers to an official known as the High Representative to ensure its implementation.
The international community remains firmly committed to peace and stability in this region. Bosnia and Herzegovina will continue to move forward on its European path.
Dodik's hardline stance is part of a drive for Republika Srpska to split away and has prompted U.S. sanctions. Lack of international investment and worsening economic conditions have weakened support for Dodik. But at a rally before his day in court, Dodik's supporters reaffirmed their backing for him.
We should defend our republic because it was born from blood, and regarding the president, no one can do anything to him. We are here. It is impossible to judge something like that.
They are judging our president because they want to leave us without homes, to expel us from this area. That will never happen. All the people here said that they love their country and everything that belongs to them.
Dodik also claims support from Serbia's President Aleksandar Vučić and Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Moscow has also denounced the charges brought against him. Reports on Friday said that Republika Srpska officers had begun moving against state police. The Bosnian State Security Agency chief denied that his officers had been forced out of their headquarters in Banja Luka. Dodik's defiance of the central government and the High Representative could endanger 30 years of peace in Bosnia. Wilson Dysard, Al Jazeera, for Inside Story.
Well, let's bring our guests into the show. We have joining us from Banja Luka, Srdan Mazalica, Member of Parliament and President of the SNSD, that's the governing party in Republika Srpska. In Sarajevo, Kurt Bassuener, co-founder of Democratization Policy Council, that's a think tank. And in Los Angeles, Jasmin Mujanovic, a senior non-resident fellow at the New Lines Institute's Western Balkans Center. A welcome to all of you. And if I can start with Kurt in Sarajevo. So, Kurt, is it fair to say this is the most serious crisis to hit Bosnia since the end of the war?
I think it is fair to say that. It's certainly the most direct challenge to the territorial integrity and statehood of Bosnia Herzegovina, as defined in the Dayton Agreement, and as reinforced by the international community. That definition is changing. I'm sure we'll get to that. Up until for the past 30 years almost. So I think the challenge that is... Yes, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
I thought you were finished. I'll let you finish the thought. Go ahead, Kurt.
The real question is what the Europeans in particular are going to do to uphold that agreement, given the current constellation.
All right, and that is a question we'll come to later, but I want to ask Jasmin at this point. I guess one of the big questions is, first, will the central government authorities, the national government authorities in Bosnia, make a move to try and arrest the president of the Bosnian autonomous entity, Milorad Dodik, now that he's vowing that he's just going to ignore court orders, he's going to ignore summons from state institutions?
Well, what we've seen to date is Bosnian state institutions behaving very responsibly. They're moving very deliberately. The Constitutional Court of Bosnia and Herzegovina is presently evaluating these laws. We expect they will be filing an emergency injunction within the next few hours. At that point, obviously, the prosecutor's office will be up to bat. We will see them opening up an investigation, although there are rumors that an investigation has obviously already been opened. I think at this time, Bosnian institutions...
But he's been issued with a summons, and he says he's not going to come and answer that summons by the prosecutor.
Yes, of course. But I think the reaction in Sarajevo is first and foremost one of trying to get all their ducks in a row. And then if and when it comes to the time where Mr. Dodik will have to be arrested, which unfortunately I anticipate, given his current behavior, may very well happen within the next few days, that can be accomplished successfully. Although, as we've seen over the last 2 days or so from reporting, including from Hungarian media, it is quite likely that Mr. Dodik will not wait to be arrested by Bosnian state police and that he will, in fact, flee the country, most likely heading to Budapest.
All right, let's bring Srdan into the discussion. Srdan, I'm guessing you have a very different perspective on what's happening. Let's start, first of all, with a question of what will be the response of Republika Srpska authorities, Republika Srpska police, if the central government does make moves to apprehend Milorad Dodik?
Within the Republika Srpska National Assembly, we have adopted several laws that prohibited and we are not recognizing and implementing the decisions of the prosecutor's office, of the court of the Bosnia Herzegovina and the state agency. I will disagree with the colleagues, especially from Mr. Mujanovic, who is saying that Dodik will be arrested. Dodik is not going to be arrested because the state agency, the SIPA, doesn't have power to confront the police of the Republic of Srpska and to arrest Milorad Dodik. Milorad Dodik won't be arrested, that's for sure. It's not going to happen in the next several days. But what we are doing, what is here important, the verdict against the Dodik is illegal, and it is also illegal. It is actually the violation of the constitutional order, because the law that enacted Christian Schmidt, former Minister of Agriculture of Germany, he enacted the amendments to the criminal law that the people who are not subject, who don't subject to his orders, has to be sentenced to the prison. It's really medieval law and putting him in the position as a colonial viceroy.
Hang on, Srdan. Hang on. His office, though, was created by the Dayton Agreement, right? So you may not like it, but he does have, according to the Dayton Agreement, which is the de facto constitution of Bosnia, he has that authority.
No, doesn't have the bone powers. Does not. We cannot find the bone powers in the Dayton Peace Agreement. The bone powers were adopted much more later in the Bonn Conference of the Peace Implementation Council, where the foreign ambassadors, members of the Peace Implementation Council, welcomed the intention of the high representatives to bring decisions, but not to enact a law, to amend the constitution, and to remove elected officials. So within the Dayton Peace Agreement, within the Constitution, Annex 4, it is said that the Parliamentary Assembly of the Bosnia Herzegovina is the institution which is in charge of the enacting the legislation, so adopting the legislation.
But forgive me for interrupting again, but Milorad Dodik is defying even central and national government institutions now. It's not just a matter of the office.
There is no national government.
Right? Well,
no, there is no national government. In the Council of the Ministers.
That was established. It's in the annexes of the General Agreement for Peace, General Framework Agreement for Peace in Bosnia Herzegovina.
I think that you are not very well informed about this. These institutions, you cannot find.
It's there. It's there in the
Constitution of Bosnia. No, they are not there. Please read the Constitution of Bosnia Herzegovina. There is no prosecutor's office, court, or state SIPA, state investigation.
No, SIPA is definitely not. That was created in 2004. But I'm saying that the General Framework Agreement for Peace in Bosnia Herzegovina, signed in Paris in 14th of December 1995. It did create two entities and one national government. Do you not?
No,
how do you?
Council of the Ministers.
Okay, those council of ministers. Do you not recognize they have any authority over the entity governments?
But the Council of the Ministers, the first, what is written in the Dayton Peace Agreement, there is no authority to judiciary. The judiciary was in charge of the entities, and in 2004, then it was the competences transferred to the Bosnia and Herzegovina level after the high representatives amended the laws, enacted the legislation. But we cannot find these institutions in the Constitution. There is no court or prosecutor's office or SIPA agency within the Constitution of Bosnia and Herzegovina. They are unconstitutional. And the court of the Bosnia and Herzegovina, there was a trial,
right,
and there was a verdict based on the law enacted by the Christian Schmidt, who is not responsible, and he doesn't have power to enact the legislation.
Okay.
So this is what we want to keep the Dayton Peace Agreement and the Constitution.
All right.
So we are preserving the Dayton Peace Agreement.
All right. Let me bring Kurt in, because I could see he was raising his eyebrows and shaking his head. So I think you have something to say about that perspective of the institutions which were set up on a national level in Bosnia. Are they illegitimate and illegal?
No, they're not. They were decided by intergovernmental agreement, including with Milorad Dodik's support, several of these institutions. And he was willing to validate them in a vote that he made in 2006. Unfortunately, the Constitution was not amended in the so-called April package, but he was willing to put all those elements into the Constitution. Every new institution that was built in post-war state building in Bosnia Herzegovina that had been agreed by both the Federation and Republika Srpska, he had agreed to. So this is revisionism. This is an attempt to renegotiate from the current position. Everything that happened before is illegal. We want to go back to a state that has no power, no judiciary, no ability to try organized crime and corruption, which is one of the things that the state court that convicted him has power to do. So I don't think that that's a legitimate argument. That is a consistent Republika Srpska argument that everything that has happened is illegal and we want to go back to original Dayton, but I don't think it holds water.
Let's bring in, I guess, the bottom line question, Jasmin, is this a country that is heading back to war?
No, it's not a country that's headed back to war. But just one very quick thing. I do want to point out the absurdity of what my colleague Luka has just said, because your audience that was listening would have heard a man who was arguing basically the statute law was unconstitutional, right? It's the equivalent of saying that because the FBI is not in the American Constitution, it's an unconstitutional body, right? So as Kurt has obviously explained, virtually every aspect of what Mr. Dodik is currently jousting against is something that in previous moments he and his party had supported, including something that has now completely been lost sort of in this conversation, that Mr. Dodik once was an erstwhile very strident supporter, for instance, of Bosnia-Herzegovina's NATO integration as well. But be that as it may, no, Bosnia-Herzegovina is not headed towards conflict. First and foremost, because Mr. Dodik does not have the power that some of his predecessors had, for instance, in 1992, when Serb nationalist forces, again, sort of illegally attempted to secede from Bosnia-Herzegovina, ultimately resulting in the Bosnian genocide. That was a time when Serb nationalist forces and the regime in Belgrade at that time under Slobodan Milosevic had far, far greater power at their disposal and still were unsuccessful in trying to break up Bosnia. Mr. Dodik has a fraction of the political and kinetic power that people like Radovan Karadzic and Slobodan Milosevic had. He does not have the capacity to break up the Bosnian state. That's not to say that we're not headed towards a potentially very...
It sounds like you're saying, Jasmin, that the regional situation has changed. Let me ask this to Srdan. Is a diplomatic resolution possible at all? Do you see any pathway whereby Bosnian Serb authorities in the Republika Srpska, they withdraw these laws and decisions which are defying the central government institutions, and also Milorad Dodik gets to stay in office and, you know, sort of the threat hanging over his head is removed? Is there a diplomatic way out of this?
Yes, I think that there is, and we have adopted the decision in the National Assembly of Republika Srpska with several provisions, and we also invited the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, the other entity, to negotiations about the future setup, constitutional and legal setup of the Bosnia and Herzegovina. And I think that there is going to be appeal to the decision of the court of the Bosnia and Herzegovina. But I must say to Mr. Mujanovic, because the FBI is not in the U.S. Constitution, but the U.S. Has a totally different constitutional and legal setup than Bosnia and Herzegovina. This is Anglo-Saxon law. If you want to adopt the law and to organize and to establish the institution, you have to have constitutional provisions that enables these actions. I also want to say that, yes, maybe we can say that the inter-entity agreements existed, but these inter-entity agreements were violated in the later, so we have the right to retreat to judiciary.
So, Srdan, sorry to interrupt you, but basically, what is your perspective? That I mean, how would you? Can I just ask the question first, please? I mean, let me explain the question. Let me explain the question, and then I'll give you a chance to answer it. But it sounds like you're arguing to return to the situation as it was in December 1995. If you concede that the Dayton Agreement did set up two entities and one state, but if there are no state institutions whatsoever, how is there a functioning state at all then?
There are the institutions on the level of the entities. So this is.
But my question is, how is there a state? How is there a state if there are no state institutions? Because Dayton, as I'm sure you know, was simply an agreement to end the war, with the process of building the state to come next.
Well, you have different kinds of states that are decentralized and different kinds of federal structures of the countries. So there are state institutions, but nobody says in the beginning that there should be the institutions of the Bosnia and Herzegovina level. And also, the entity judiciary institutions can
everyone
also
says that, except
fight
for you.
the organized crime.
Sorry, Jasmin,
on
give
the other
Srdan, we'll give
hand,
Srdan a chance to finish his thought, and then I'll come back to you, I promise, in a second.
I would
Let's
like
give
to,
Srdan
yes.
go ahead, Srdan.
What we want to say here, that the Christian Schmidt and the law he enacted, and he doesn't have right to use the bone powers in that case. This was the violation of the constitutional order also as well when the court of the Bosnia Herzegovina and the prosecutor's office decided, made decisions based on this law, because there is no possibility that higher representatives in constitution of the Bosnia Herzegovina can enact the laws. And this is something that they did, violating both the Dayton Peace Agreement and the Constitution of Bosnia Herzegovina. I think that there is a possibility in the future for the two entities, and we also invited the other entity to negotiations, but they refused this invitation. You know, we want to discuss and we want to negotiate because this is the situation where.
All right, thank you. Let me just give a chance for Jasmin to briefly as well, Jasmin, and then we want to move on from this point. But I know you had, yes, and I'll come to you in a minute, Kurt. Go ahead, Jasmin.
Sure. So first and foremost, the important thing to emphasize here is that there is no dialogue between the entities. This is like saying that we need to have a constitutional dialogue between Kentucky and Ohio, right? There are state institutions in Bosnia Herzegovina. Amendments to the Constitution of Bosnia Herzegovina can be enacted exclusively through the state parliament of Bosnia Herzegovina. If Mr. Mazalica and Mr. Dodik would like to have a serious conversation about institutional rearrangements in Bosnia Herzegovina, they can do so at the state parliament, which they obviously have refused to do so. They also have the option of going to the Bosnian Constitutional Court, which they have refused to do so. And in every case that they have done so, they have been struck down. And they also have the option of going to the European Court of Human Rights, which they have also refused to do so. So very clearly, there's an attempt here to completely rewrite the nature of the political system.
Let me bring you Srdan's point, though. They don't recognize the institutions of the state, though, like the Bosnian Constitutional Court.
Well, of course, but that's the point. Well, that's the point, right?
But we are recognizing the institutions of the Bosnia and Herzegovina. We are recognizing the parliamentary assembly of the
entity level,
the Council of the Ministers.
All right.
But what is the problem? If we want to negotiate,
all right, let Jasmin finish. Srdan, sorry, let's let Jasmin finish his point now. Go ahead.
Okay.
But exactly, right? As you've just heard, we have existing institutions. We have existing state institutions. There actually is a very clearly defined process of governance in Bosnia Herzegovina. The problem is that what Mr. Dodik and his cohort are attempting to do is something that is not viable in any country on earth, which is that subnational administrative units, such as the entities, unilaterally pull out of national laws or existing national institutions. That doesn't work anywhere. Those institutions need to be renegotiated at the state level within state institutions.
Okay, I think we've got a brief couple of minutes left, so I want to give Kurt a chance to come in because he's been waiting patiently and waving his hand. Go for it, Kurt.
Well, I mean, I think there's a contextual element that needs to be framed, which is this comes at a time that Milorad Dodik has never been as much under pressure as he is now. His popularity is low. He's low on money. He's reliant on support from external actors. You mentioned Orban, but also Aleksandar Vučić in Serbia.
Kurt, how do we know his popularity is low? How do we know his popularity is low? I'm sure his supporters would argue he won the last round of elections.
Ever.
Look at the population drift in Republika Srpska, which is ahead even of the federation where people are leaving. People are leaving the whole region. I take that point. But the reality is...
Srdan, sorry, let's give Kurt a chance to finish the thought too. Go ahead, Kurt.
Okay.
I mean, there's a legitimacy problem for the entire political class, but Milorad Dodik has the poison chalice of being the man responsible for everything in Republika Srpska because it's a pyramid. There's one boss. He's been boss for 19 years. So if there's something wrong there, he's the only one to blame, and that's why a lot of people are not leaving their state institution jobs because they're not confident they're going to get paid if they do.
All right. Let me put this question, Srdan. All right. Okay, go ahead.
The problem here is that there is no negotiator from the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. There is no the credible and legitimate political power in Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina that we can negotiate with. In Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, you can say that there is Dodik, and that Dodik has a power. Okay, Dodik is a president of the Republika Srpska, and if you want to negotiate with the Republika Srpska, you go to president. If I go to the United States, then Donald Trump is the president, and I negotiate with the Donald Trump. Who is the person in Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina that we can negotiate with about the current situation?
Okay, let's give Jasmin a chance to reply to that. Okay, reply to that, Jasmin.
Again, what my colleague in Banja Luka is suggesting is that the state government, which is to say the federal government of the United States or the national government of Germany, should be negotiating with a mayor or with a regional governor. That's not how constitutional arrangements work in Bosnia. That's not how constitutional arrangements work anywhere in the world.
Okay.
Sub-national administrative units do not negotiate with the national government.
All right. I think we've got
the fact that the federation.
All right.
There's one more point to be made here. Yeah.
Briefly, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the other point is, look, the federation entity and the rest of Bosnia Herzegovina is considerably more democratic, unfortunately, than what we presently find in the RS entity. So, no, there isn't one person.
Okay, because we're running rapidly out of time. I want to ask Kurt a basic question. At the bottom line, they say there can never be a war in the Balkans without there being regional appetite for it. Is there regional and international appetite for a conflict right now? When you read everyone from the Europeans, the Donald Trump-led America, NATO, and the Russians and Serbia on the other side?
The international constellation is not positive. Bosnia-Herzegovina being a question mark for 19 years has brought out the worst in Serbia and Croatia. I think what you're seeing Dodik do is try to castle up to Vučić and Orban to get connected to Trump and hopefully get him to weigh in on his side. At the popular level, there's no appetite for conflict. But conflict always comes from above in the Balkans for political benefit. It did the first time in 1991-92. And so could we have a war a la 1992? No. Could people get hurt? Yes. And then the dynamic would change. So that's why the European Union needs to reinforce its deterrent on the ground, make clear there will be no secession because it will not be permitted. And then I think you'll see the entire political situation calm because the possibility of leveraging fear will be dissipated.
I like the sentence of calm and dissipating fear because we are out of time. Let's hope that calm and dissipation of fear holds across. Thank you so much to our guests. I'm afraid we are out of time. I know this can go on, but Srdan Mazalica, Kurt Bassuener and Jasmin Mujanovic. And thank you too for watching. You can see the show again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, head over to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Sami Zeidan, and the whole team here. For now, it's goodbye.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.